Hello everyone, and welcome back to Tesla Plays MaGMML 3. Time for the judge commentary. We have Stage 141, Brightman Remix by Licious. 40.3500 score, 3.205 difficulty, 16.8 in design, 12.0 in fun, 6.4 in creativity, 9.6 in aesthetics, 9.0 in functionality. Mick, 62 of 100. Remixing an official Mega Man level. It's not a high score as creativity, point blank. But if the goal was just to make a fun Brightman level, well, this isn't terrible. This remix does a lot more with Batons and Brightman's platform than the original did. The result can be entertaining. I particularly enjoyed the final climb, the token room, props to that checkpoint, and the first couple of crickets. That being said, the last cricket section, don't go for the token, is downright annoying, mostly because of the 10-second wait for it to hop through a spike corridor, followed immediately by a surprise Alekin. That was a damper in my enjoyment. Back to the level's core issues a number of surprise, poorly placed enemies, just like the Alekin. The very first Alekin jumps you right before the first arc platform. First Ring, or Saturn Seeker, appears while you're riding an arc platform towards it. The lone Bolton and Naughton is semi-camouflaged against a blue background. Here's mid-jump, so on and so forth. It's a common and annoying issue, and it's the one that advised to just above all else. Mid-bosses can also be insufferable Buster only. Sparkman should have been reskinned to a lightning-throwing Brightman. But considering the easy application of our weapons, those are severe issues in the long run. By no means the greatest, but I found it fun enough. Shinryu, 40 of 100. Initial impressions didn't exactly start off high for this level, considering one of the first things that happens is an enemy popping out of thin air, which can easily blindside you during a crucial jump. Unfortunately, this more or less serves as foreshadowing for how most of the stage plays out. When it comes to virtually any given obstacle, they absolutely need proper telegraphs to avoid becoming cheap hits. This is especially true of jumping segments, which is what a majority of this level consists of. A few moments here that border on being cheap, with what little time you have to react to them, such as the first ring that appears in the stage, along with the wall of dust blocks at the end of the same segment. They're certainly doable, but they're still really punishing moments for being so early in the level. The rest of the stage follows a similar pattern for both the normal and token pass. The latter, however, I'm really not a fan of how it ends. That mini-boss and the arcing platforms really don't mesh well together, and the fight becomes downright tedious unless you're abusing Lesser Trident or Magnetic Shockwave. What little remains of the stage afterwards is actually pretty decent. The jumps aren't quite as involved as some of the ones earlier in the stage, but I still enjoyed that part a fair amount, aside from the final jump to the boss door. The timing required to land on each of these arcing platforms is incredibly tight, to the point where I honestly don't blame anyone for using Magnet Beam or Rush to just skip it. Right. As for the boss, normally one hold it against a level for using a vanilla dev kit boss, but this one's a special case, given the name of the stage itself. Get that Brightman isn't in the dev kit, and having the wrong Robot Master show up at the end comes off as a bad substitute for what could have been. Ultimately, I think the climax level would have been better if it had been a series of tough, but fair platforming segments, other than Sparkman suddenly showing up. Patchy, 61 of 100. Brightman's Bright Iteration! Has anyone been keeping count of the amount of remix stages that got submitted? This one's not bad, but it's not very impressive either. Some of the enemy additions seem like they were added for the simple fact that they're electric themed, which felt shoehorned in and doesn't quite blend in well with the level design. Love the challenges of the stage simply involve riding those platforms over instant death hazards, which can become frustrating really quickly after failing, being sent back a few times. Get that the platforms were one of the more memorable gimmicks of the original Brightman stage, but this stage just really stretched out the usage of them until it became tedious. Like what you did with one room with the Gachapon, though. I can't say the same for when the same setup was used for the Snow mini-boss. Having to time your jumps for attacking, tip of dealing with attack timing in order to hit the snail's eyes, when they're vulnerable, is too much for a mini-boss fight. By contrast, the main boss, Sparkman, is just pathetic. That's right, Status Demand with Brightman, the smartest robot master. Hey! Flashman's better. I know not everyone is capable of programming a boss, but like, come on. You could just done a simple sprite change. The arena's more varied than your typical flat plane ones. Sparkman is still just a relatively simple boss that really just doesn't make the fight all that different or stand out. Flashman A5, 53 of 100. This remix is an admirable job of balancing innovation with preservation. I don't think the right decisions were made about what to keep and what to change. If there's anything about the source material that needs an update, it's a nonsensical theming. I'm already dubious about grasshoppers, bagworms, and totem poles populating a power plant, snails, miniature planets, and removing Brightman from his own level, add insult to injury. Moving level outdoors or replacing surrounding the offending enemies, Octoball's minions with it perfectly. Brightman would look awesome with Sparkman's moveset. Would have been preferable to expanding the roster. The larger roster sounded clumsily too. New hazards invariably appear when there's no time to react to them, let alone learn how they function. Enemies are forgotten as suddenly as they are introduced. Setups with good potential are mishandled. The Darkness Maze is pointless when you can stand around safely until the lights return. Gachapon and Eskaru need moving platforms that are higher and slower, respectively, to be at all fair. Sparkman's chamber is disappointingly identical to the one in Mega Man 3. Personally, I was hoping for some crossover with the Game Boy iteration of this level. The graphics look almost as good as they do in the original, marred only by some architectural contrivances with spikes and platform tracks. Each segment has a distinct feel, not a clean difficulty progression. Checkpoints are mostly where they need to be. Part placement and level flow are appropriately deliberate, but could use a little polish, as Kid Sparkman's teleporter to station targeting. Continuous vertical scrolling in the last section may induce queasiness. I'd like that the level tries lots of new things, especially in the second half. I just wish they had panned out better. I'm surprised he didn't make a joke comment on that he's the better time stopper, but Hey Spark, 53 of 100. You know the idea about introducing gimmicks is to introduce them, not to throw the player into immediate death spikes everywhere. This also plays the enemies, by the way. Most egregious is the first red, falling, swinging platform, which is the first gimmick seen at the stage. Not everyone is going to remember every detail about Brightman's stage, after all. Several of the enemies and gimmicks require you to be Nostradamus, where they are placed at unexpected locations you need to know about in order to even survive. Bolton and Nuton, an enemy that is invincible when you try to pass it, is a prime example. Both of the mini-bosses were pretty infuriating. Of the two, the Iskaru was the most ridiculous, with times that could kill you without much opportunity to dot its eyes. The upper route was interesting, but locked you out of acquiring the token without any indication it would do this. Not a fan. The stage shows potential with its ideas, and the final climb, especially, was unique, and a fair challenge. It's a shame that the stage did not start at an easier difficulty and build up to this. Sparkman also existed. Please swap the sprites, dude. So, yeah. This stage definitely was not a good first impression. It was easier than some stages I played, but man. The worst was yet to come, though, and I just really didn't like some of the sections with the lifts. But next up, we get 140. Akudama Empire Mothership. 40.8 of 100 score, 3.2 of 5 difficulty, 16 in design, 13 in fun, 8.0 in creativity, 7.8 in aesthetics, 9.6 in functionality, 20% time penalty. Yeah, I really think the difficulty rating should have been higher, but that's me. Because this one... I remember just hating. Mick, 54 of 100. Starting with literally just Magical Dorpy. Yeah, okay. But that's what Magical Dorpy is. Was the Cryon Conquest here in the States. Just a moment. Starting with literally just Magical Dorpy's final stage was a bold move, though perhaps not the best for creative first impressions. Thankfully, Namanaki is a fun fight. She's simple, but the mobility of her spread shot adds just the right level of complication to make things a little interesting. I completely understand why a brand new boss was created for the endgame, but I do think more could be done with the rematch. For one idea, perhaps putting some of the early levels flame jets on the floor is a simple way to limit the player's movement and twist the fight. No thank you. At the same time, it shouldn't go overboard and too unfair or not fun, which I feel like that would have done. Oy. As for the level, it doesn't quite live up to the boss fight. Starts off well enough, simple variety of early enemies. My only real issue is the flame jets aren't obvious enough. However, the level quickly overloads its assets. Pretty sure I count 10 different enemy types before the first mid-stage checkpoint. The number only grows. Incidentally, players, if you missed a second token, open the menu and hit retry so the checkpoint below doesn't force a restart. Yeah, I knew better. Magical Dorpy wasn't quite this crazy with enemy types in its different stages, making them a hassle to handle. It also doesn't help that the surprise stars are blue against a blue background. Please use some more contrast. Beyond the enemy bloat, this is a few bad habits with its gimmicks. The majority of the concepts are good, but they don't show up nearly enough. It's a huge shame. Part of why I suggest using at least one for Nomanaki's rematch. Beyond that, forced weapon usage in Magical Dorpy worked well due to a lack of proper weapon energy. Mega Man, for whatever reason, doesn't have infinite ammo here, and that makes those segments far more irritating than they would be in their home game. Wait, so in her game, they don't use weapon energy? Confused now? How would that work? Can she just use her weapons infinitely? Huh. Interesting. Conceptually, this is alright. Dorpy mixes well with Mega Man for obvious reasons. Did enjoy Nomanaki's fight. However, this tries to use too much at once, and as a result, doesn't do enough with what it has. He didn't comment on the fact that the spikes were hard to see on the stage, because of the coloring. Shinryu, 54 of 100. I was also a bit skeptical when I first saw what the stage was referencing. A level based on Magical Kids Dorpy seems like a solid choice for this type of contest, given how many times the original game has been compared to Mega Man. At the same time, though, this game that had a lot of issues as well. So on one hand, I was worried that some of those issues would find their way here. On the other hand, I was hopeful that those issues would be addressed and result in a good reimagining of the source material. Things kicked off interesting enough with the boss fight at the start, though an understandably easy one, given it was meant to set up for a harder fight at the end. From there, the level plays out pretty decently for a while. Most of the enemies get proper introductions, and they tend to play off the room layouts well, up until a certain point. After about midway through the stage, the rooms start to become oversaturated with enemies. It's not uncommon for anywhere between 2 to 4 flying enemies to suddenly show up from the side of the screen, especially during the last few sections of the level. Combine this with very cramped areas, such as the underwater segments, along with enemies that have awkward movement patterns, the light purple sphere guys that fire when directly over you being the main culprit. Things get chaotic very quickly. Also, while this may be a controversial stance, I think the inclusion of those star-shaped enemies was a bad choice. The way they suddenly pop into existence to surround and close in on you was annoying in the original Dorpy, and it's annoying here. Doubly so when they're practically the same color as the background. It's a shame because if it weren't for the enemy spam, I think this would be a mostly serviceable level, a little rough around the edges. Besides, cutting down on the amount of enemies, I think a good place to start would be with fleshing out the gimmicks. The fire jets barely show up, the flying gears only become a threat in the third token room. Which is a shame because it had potential to be a pretty decent recurring gimmick. That aside, the only other platforming tricks the stage pulls when you're forced to use the magnet beam. I didn't mind these sections at first, since you're given free weapon refills along the way. There was very little chance you'd run out of ammo even before that. Towards the end, though, these segments get ruined due to the enemy placement. There's at least 2 parts, I can recall, where you'd be prompted to fire the magnet beam, walk across to the other side, only be blindsided by enemies with few options to safely fight back. As for the end, sorry to hear you weren't able to make the boss fight who you originally intended it to be, all for very understandable reasons. Even though what we got was essentially the first boss again with a slightly different room layout. At the very least, to appreciate the thought of not wanting things to end on a complete anticlimax. Like I said before, there's a lot of potential in the concept of remaking stuff from Dorothy. It just needed a bit more fine-tuning in this case. Another one that didn't bring that up. Patchy 64 of 100. Empires in space! Dun dun dun. References that I don't get, so the odd enemy designs the way they are spammed here probably all closely resemble the game. There's no excuse this entry for how it's going to be scored, though. Strange force weapon usage throughout, that does not immediately convey to players that they should use them. I immediately thought you have to damage boost yourself through the spikes with the laser shooting frequently. Laser shooters above the water, they're just kinda there. Lasers bounce off the water surface, so they never really reach you while you're submerged. Background is somewhat busy looking, kinda blends in with the tile set, hindering the readability of the actual layout of the stage sometimes. I often kept walking, thinking it's a straight path ahead, only to fall into spikes that I didn't even realize were there at first. Thank you! It figures Patchy would be the one to catch that. I feel like the first encounter with the boss is harder than the final one, since there you have less room to maneuver, while you have a lot more space to charge around the final arena. I actually had more trouble with the one at the end, just because she was less likely to come down where I could hit her easily, but admittedly, if I would have taken the time to practice, I probably would have beat her better. First encounter with the boss is harder than the final one. So you have less room to maneuver, while you have a lot more space to charge around the final arena. Not a bad boss, just kind of a little anticlimactic to end it easier than how it started. Oops, damn it. Flashman A5, 65 of 100. I haven't played the Cryon Conquest / Magical Kids Dorothy, so I can't speak with any authority about how successful this level is as a crossover. My research suggests that the aesthetics and gameplay are in line with the original, though perhaps a little off the mark with the choice of music and number of enemies on any given screen. One thing I can say for sure is that, in lieu of a magic broom, the level needs either infinite rush jet energy or free weapon refills before the spike gaps. Strictly viewing this as a Mega Man level, there are some up and downs, but no up and downs thankfully. Upsides include a slew of novel hazards, enjoyably designed underwater segments, satisfying boss fights bookending the level. Downsides include a very loosely structured challenge progression, overly distant checkpoints, and unforgiving final stretch. Visually, there's a lot to take in. Enemies tend to blend in with the background. Background often has a similar texture to the foreground, so I can't always tell what's what at a quick glance. Eye fatigue starts to set in after a while. Changing up the backgrounds only helps so much. Orally, I have a similar problem. Music is fine for a while, but it works thin by the end of the level. I'd be fine with the high screen count otherwise. In terms of construction flow, token placement, and tentacle polish, the level is solid. The few oversights are minor enough not to mention. Would have liked marks to have been hidden in a secret room or not present at all. The climax of this level is the worst place to receive unnecessary excuses from a Kirby character. I like the level well enough, but I wonder whether I'd be more appreciative or less impressed if I were more familiar with the source material. I just found it frustrating as hell. A-Spark, 35 of 100. You cannot just take assets from another game, use them in the same manner as the original game, and expect them to work out well. The Korean Conquest has specific alterations to the MaGMML style to make them work in that game. It's the ability to aim, and infinite weapon usage, and even little things like oxygen meters. Oh dear. The entire level just becomes a mess, and a pretty boring one at that. There are simply too many enemies on screen at any given time throughout the whole stage, some of which come out of nowhere, and others blend into the background. The player takes a lot of unexpected damage, particularly frustrating enemies, where the squid, a waste of time, doesn't work because you can shoot upwards in the source game, and the armored ball, where the solution to avoiding it is to stand still, making it another huge waste of time. The starfish were completely unavoidable if you had not been through this section before, and very easy to slide into. The rocket fish are pretty much the same issue. The stage has a whole lot of spikes, including after vertical transitions, making the stage feel very tight, given how many enemies there were around. This would not have been as bad if you had added reasonable checkpoint placement throughout. There are far too few of these. Despite all of these, the stage did not feel very hard, says you, but often frustrates based on unavoidable deaths and enemies that are difficult to see. Forced weapon usage, while not an issue when used well, is fairly pointless at this stage. The visual game was built around the broom mechanic, and had a huge number of puzzles built around it. This type of weapon does not exist in this MaGMML game. You need to make these sections more interactive, rather than use weapons to bypass spikes repeatedly. Given how many gimmicks appear but are only used once, it feels like you attempted to include everyone from the base game in this level, and none of them were used in an interesting way. Almost everything in the stage was used better in the source game, from puzzles to enemy placement and usage. The boss was a nice start to the stage, although I would have liked a different climax, not fought the same thing again. The token rooms were the highlight, and well, had nice challenges within. I appreciate the effort put into recreating the original game, but more effort should have been made to make it work for Mega Man. So I think Patchy's the only one that really took note that the spikes were often kind of tricky to work around, because you really had trouble telling when you're about to fall into solid ground or spikes, since it was sometimes hard, unless you were really paying attention, to differentiate between the two, because they both have the same color. Oy. I also would have liked it if they weren't like instant kill spikes, but just damage spikes. That would have been a little more fair at least, but... fucking stage. Okay. Stage 139. Creatively named level. Hehe. By T-Money. 40.85 of 100 score. 3.8 F5 difficulty. 13... hold on. Damn. Freaking itching. 13.2 design, 7.6 fun, 6.2 creativity, 7.6 in aesthetics, 8.4 in functionality with a 5% time penalty. Meg, 33 of 100. So I'm not exactly sure how, but something about this makes me very angry whenever I play it. It could be the general length of the level, could be the fairly large number of spikes, could be the annoying ascent assets, could be the sheer number of fake-out endings and false starts, or it could just be any combination thereof. Whatever the case, this is not a level I enjoyed. It's not a level I'm likely to replay anytime soon. To elaborate a little more, one of the prominent frustration factors is in the length. I'm really confident this is over 70 screens long for one element, and the average Robot Master stage is 25 screens. A lot of this is owed to the level's penchant for fake-outs. You're led to believe that you're going to a castle to take out Honey Woman. After that, it's suddenly an upside-down pendulum mess that repeats the same exact story beats. Just says a Centaur Man, and then it fixes it again with a Flashbang Castle. But then Flashman's on screen, I just want this to end. Funny, since I'm actually playing as him. The sheer number of spikes does not help. Single misstep can often get you killed. And checkpoints are a bit sporadic. Great. To make matters worse, the level picks some pretty awkward assets. The gimmick side is alright, though trying to manage dual pendulums and reverse gravity while also trying to not die to those spikes, that's an exercise in frustration. And folks are way better off just using Rush Bike here. I tried that. Didn't really work out for me. But the real main issue is with the enemies. Brokers, Trick Madness, low flat enemies, Machine Gun Joes, Elemental DX. This is just a sample of the enemies chosen here. They tend to be extremely aggravating. Considering these enemies are so common in the level, definitely brings down the overall mood. Individually, they might be fine, and all these together in one super long level is really, really unfun. That's honestly my opinion in a nutshell. Level design is completely terrible. Some good stuff beneath the sheer length, sporadic checkpoints, the number of spikes. However, the asset selection, and the way it handles the length, and just makes it really not fun. And not fun is not good. Yeah, I couldn't make it very far. Shinryu, 30 of 100. Aside from a few moments here and there, this is a relatively uneventful level. Doesn't help that it's somewhat lengthy, too. What may not be as big as some other stages, goes on for just long enough to be a bit of a slog to play through. The thing is, most of the challenges each segment aren't necessarily bad, they're just kinda dull. While some of these sections feature decent synergy between the enemies and gimmicks, most of them either end up being too easy or have very slow progression. Sometimes both. Upside down ladder climb found shortly into the second area is the prime example of this. For one, it doesn't even work as intended, since the water jets can't push you into the spikes, unless you let go of the ladder for whatever reason. Even if it did work, however, it would essentially just be the same challenge repeated over the course of 3 screens. While the other segments have a bit more variety to them, it wasn't enough to stop me from zoning out a few times while going through the stage. Until this point, the only other thing I could think to comment on was how the music didn't loop properly. That changed once I reached 2 particular parts. The reverse gravity plus dual swing section. And the high gravity area with fork blocks. Both these segments are a lot more engaging than the rest of the stage, but they also come with their own share of issues. The dual swing section is somewhat ruined by the chuck magnets due to their replacements. They often end up respawning every time you move the swings from left to right, which can easily catch you off guard while trying to jump to the next platform. The finicky gravity flipping section that follows doesn't exactly help matters either. As for the high gravity segment, I would have probably enjoyed it a lot more if the fork blocks were assigned better patterns. That row of 3 right before the Pirabug is incredibly annoying to deal with, to the point where I actually encourage bypassing it completely with Magnet Beam. All things considered, I think the stage should focus more on refining its more unique gimmick combinations, along with probably getting more playtesting. Patchy, 51 of 100. Creatively thought out remark! Oh, wow. It started out fine, but it got increasingly more infuriating to play through as the amount of death spikes increased. With annoying enemies such as the cannons being so quick to ambush you as you enter their firing range. There needs to be another checkpoint in the middle of the fortress section, probably right at the introduction to the Joelman platforms. Honey Woman seems quite a bit more difficult to deal with in this specific arena too. What's the deal with those flying plate enemies with the faces? Their hitboxes are either way inconsistent, or I just have no idea how to properly deal with them. It's super irritating having to deal with them respawning on screen edges while swinging around the Joelman platforms in order to make it through the spikes, while being upside down on top of that. Being upside down adds almost nothing to the later portion of the stage, except for maybe making Bubble Man kinda a joke, I guess. Kinda like that it changes how you approach the Joe enemies. where you have to duck through as they swing their weapon, but the problem is you can still get hit sometimes with the wonky hitboxes. So many shielded enemies littered throughout, to exist only to pad out the playtime. With how much you're forced to wander around near instant death spikes, they can make it so you have to redo everything at any moment. Not a fan at all! At least this version of Rude Buster isn't bad looping aside. Is that the name of the soundtrack? I don't know. Flashman 85, 63 of 100. Before submitting a level, please make sure to A. Proofread your text, B. Check that your music loops properly, and C. Give your level a real name. Ahem. I like the premise of a continual bait and switch, all the different assets, admittedly a few too many, orbiting around a central core of gravity gimmicks, and the creative boss chambers that add new dimensions to familiar fights. The areas with MM3 Fortress graphics combine enemies and gimmicks in terrific ways, minus the water spouts that only look like they'll push you off the ladder into the spikes. Aside from a handful of telling oversights, the graphics generally look nice, and the music fits perfectly. I'm disappointed about difficult new challenges being thrown at the player without any warm-up. Good luck with Escarus on gravity changes, dual platforms, and falling platforms if you've never encountered them before. More power-ups are essential. Keys should really be unavoidable, and teleporters should drop you off in front of the key door. I'm also not fond of the entire last section. Despite some thoughtful challenges, the level starts to drag at that point, and glitchy simulation is no excuse for lazy-looking tile work. I really don't like the entire section with reverse gravity and dual platforms. It's a nightmare of stressfully precise jumps and have nowhere enemies. Toki Hero would have been much more manageable. Special weapons are a must. 2 new gimmicks are then introduced in close succession, with no breather in between. Even just throwing in a few screen transitions would help break up sections like this. The secret path, while very clever, teleports you to an unfamiliar screen where it's unclear whether to go down to your death or up. The highs are very high, but the lows drag everything down. With some editing, this could be a really fun level. A-Spark, 30 out of 100. I mean, yeah, it lives up to its name, I suppose. And why am I hearing this music in multiple entries at this point? It's from, like, Undertale or Deltarune, right? It's a nice tune and all, but that looping is terrible. Interesting. And man, I really did enjoy this stage. But the biggest positive I could say about the stage is that a couple of the Robot Master Rooms really improved the difficulty of the fights in a contest setting. But man, the stage and its issues come down to its enemy choice, sheer stage length, and sheer checkpoint length too, now I think about it. You know, it gets a bit much. The stage severely outlives its welcome. It's long enough that even making use of weapons to bypass the more irritating enemies results in you quickly running out. Lots of shielded enemies that have to be killed so the player can navigate some really awkward platforming segments that involve some very finicky gimmicks. When an enemy is not shielded, it's arbitrarily hard to hit, such as the enemy from the WonderSwan game. Which combos really nicely with that swing from Jewel Man. By nicely, I mean ARG! I already despise the Hell Metals from 5 for Game Boy. This stage elevates how annoying the little gits are to an art form. A frustrating art form. And that's about it. That's the core issue with the stage. It's just not incredibly difficult. Passes that mark and it's right into well and truly annoying. Whilst I noted the new room layouts are positive, using end-of-stage bosses as mid-bosses arbitrarily extends the stage and feels redundant. I can make notes on individual challenges and why they don't work, but I feel that would also make an already fairly redundant comment even more so at this point. This stage is obnoxious on all counts. As I said before, I really did not enjoy this. I couldn't make it that far. I couldn't make it far at all. Again, this is one of those stages I plan on coming back at some point. If I remember to, anyway. once I have, like, cheats enabled, and that will make it easier to beat, but seriously. This stage, I just did not have the patience for. And then, last but not least, we have Decoy Man by The Great Metaphor. 41.2 of 100 score, with a 1.8 F5 difficulty, 12.6 in design, 9.4 in fun, 6.8 in creativity, 3.8 in aesthetics, 8.6 in functionality. Mick, 33 of 100. Nice try with the fake out, but I didn't fall for it. I was about to, but then I saw the bottom of the stage was going to give out, and I remembered the stage name. Decoy Man does a good job making the initial level feel like an authentic rush job. Super quick to reach the boss, easy enemies, poor visual contrast. No real platforming challenge. I would have been fooled if it weren't for the name. To give the level some credit, the Crystal Joes in the rush job have some occasionally dangerous placement. Normally they aren't placed in ways that hit me, but I've been tagged her once or twice, and it's my own fault when it happens. Also props for the Cutman M-Tank. I like the reward for the risky close-range kill. So you can pick that up. I thought it was fake. Fortunately, the real level sees no improvement on the fake one. The enemies are still too easy. Real shame, since while the concepts have a lot of potential, fake floors are mild inconvenience at most, though that's better than frustrating. The platforming is still dull. More prominently, the aesthetic is worse than the fake out. No thanks to the rather ear-piercing music. But the most interesting the level gets is the token room. Even then, I can remember most of it. Suppose I can get props for a custom boss, but Decoy Man is boring compared to Cutman. So the whole thing flounders. It started with a good premise, but the end result leaves a lot to be desired. It's a shame, really. Shinryu, 28 of 100. If it wasn't for the title of the stage, you might have actually got me with that opening bit. Either way, I don't think it would have changed my perspective on this level that much. It's a stage with a very promising idea, but ends up being held back by a lot of issues. For a level that's meant to be based around deception, the design here doesn't do a whole lot to properly capitalize on that. And I'm glad for that. Terrain and enemy configurations barely complement each other, making almost every obstacle completely unthreatening. It's a bit disappointing, since the custom enemies seem like they could do, or could be, interesting to fight, if paired with better room layouts. As it is now, almost everything here is pretty bare bones. The fake floor gimmick could have worked wonders to spice up the level, but the placement only serves to hinder your movement for a few seconds, and might make you second guess a jump or two. On a related note, I could never tell if there was supposed to be an attempt at telegraphing with one of the fake floors in the token room. Bring this up since there's a Crystal Joe that routinely falls from near the top of the screen towards the end of that section. It always looked a little off to me. That one oddity aside, the only thing left to mention is the boss, who is, unfortunately, just as basic as the rest of the stage. The Decoy Man's pattern is completely fixed and predictable. Cloney Summons doesn't really add much depth to the fight. Yeah, I will disagree with that. It made him hard as hell to dodge. You'll still end up dodging him the same way, but now there's slightly less room for error. All in all, this is a disappointing end to a stage that never really lives up to its potential. Then again, they might have just used weaknesses on him, I'm not sure. Because I was doing it with Charge Shots and Buster. Patchy. Illusionary Melancholy. Oh no. Oh, this stage did a number on her. Okay, got me there with that fake out. That one was good. Fits the Robot Master in question, so I don't mind it. What I don't really like is that you can't tell which platforms are fake. Well, thankfully the stage restrained itself from doing something evil with it. This can still lead to some unfair situations while fighting the enemies. And that's really all there is going on with the stage. The rest of the level design boils down to straight paths while shooting the enemies in that way. There aren't any significant setups that keep the player engaged with the level. Also the music. It's very disorienting, and depressing sounding. I guess it fits the backstory of Decoy Man. Either way, it makes the stage kind of insufferable, intentional or not. Decoy Man has a rather simple pattern, but not so simple to get around with the projectile is behind after each jump. Combine that with Decoy's high contact damage, a copy of himself showing up at the later half of the battle. This quickly becomes a rough boss fight for sure. Yeah. Flashman A5, 42 of 100. You have the blueprint for something truly special here. Present the player with an unusually short or unremarkable level that was obviously rushed, then reveal the real level, which develops a thought-provoking story, subverts expectations at every turn. Problem is, this level topples its own potential by subverting all the wrong expectations. I'm talking about expectations such as text boxes that are free of typos, custom sprites in a style that reads as Mega Man screen transitions that are safe from any angle, and music that doesn't detract from the enjoyment with dreary dissonance. I'm talking about a learning curve that teaches the player to be suspicious before being blindsided. Talk about challenges that grow in difficulty and complexity, that consist of more than a bunch of stationary enemies hanging out on the ground. Checkpoint, screen count, overall focus, and a well-handled fake-out with Cutman among the few times that meet my expectations. I do like the different varieties of metal, especially the cheeky token, and I like how the story is parceled out amidst a series of small challenges. Excuse me. Okay. I wish the story were worked into the boss fight, though. I think some dialogue and one final bait and switch of some sort would have tied the whole thing together nicely. Some things that are obvious should be more sneaky, gee, the concealed turrets that stand out like a sore thumb. Some things that are sneaky should be more obvious. Gee, the fake floors that are utterly indistinguishable from normal floors. Theming could stand to be stronger. The plain foreground-background graphics don't seem particularly decoyish. There's nothing really deceptive or surprising about the enemies that aren't disguised. Love what this level could have been, but it needs a lot of work to get there. And last but not least, A-Spark, 54 of 100. Man, after that intentionally crap opening, I'm not gonna lie, I'm disappointed by this level. So much potential wasted. You had fake-out floors, disguised enemies, and the opportunity to really play with the player's expectations. Which you didn't. Everything was rather predictable past the opening, which is sad. Few things I did rather like, as always. The rejig dev kit assets are nice to see. I actually loved the fake floor enemy. Shame the 4-way Crystal Joe actually adds nothing to how you fight the enemy. He and the rejig cannon never get placed in positions where their alterations amount to anything. Sadly, the level is just really basic at its core. It doesn't do much beyond the scope of the intentionally crap opening, with a few nifty new enemies. So this weird backstory was spelling almost as bad as mine. I eventually sort of zoned out by the final few signposts. They didn't really add much. Also, the music had a bit too many high-pitched notes. The actual tune isn't bad, but the implementation is rather awful at times. I'm not sure what to make of Decoy Man himself. His pattern is super basic, but still puts out a challenge. See, it's pretty hard, and his small hops don't give them much room to maneuver. I appreciate the hologram, even if said hologram firing out harmful projectiles is a tad weird. Still, the stage is better for having a ritual fight. Burst out laughing when I saw him, so I guess that counts for something. There's a very ROM hack quality, all to his own. Yeah, that fight was just annoying to do Buster only, just because you had so little room to maneuver when he starts being in the clone. Oh my god. But yeah, that's all for this one. Um, I will say that despite my frustrations, I'm still enjoying what the game's offering, if for no other reason, because I can tell that the game is slowly but surely adding new mechanics every few tiers I complete, so that's nice to know. Um, and I'm just gonna have to hope that my patience holds out so I could continue to get to the later tiers. Because I've only seen up to tier 5, thanks to more on Mithril stuff. I have no idea what to expect after that. None. So, we're gonna have to see how that goes. But, thank you guys for watching. I will talk to you later. See ya.